please. Yes. I want to say, first of all, thank you, Debbie, for inviting me to speak tonight. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be here and to share an evening like this. In discussing what we wanted to point out this evening, we came to the conclusion that it would be great to discuss some of the women in Staten Island's history. And of course, they're not all documented. That is always a problem with certain groups of people. The history is not always well documented. So we've done some real digging, and we've come up with what we can come up with in relation to women on Staten Island and their impact. One of the most phenomenal things that I found out in the last 7 or 8 years was that there was a woman by the name of Emmeline Earle. Now, believe it or not, she was documented as being the only woman from Staten Island to serve in the Civil War. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with Lynn Rogers, who are Friends of Abandoned Cemeteries. Well, in Lynn's own words, women who participated in the Civil War were mostly undocumented. They did not receive war pensions, nor are they listed among the ranks of regiments. There was a minor notation next to the name of Emmeline Earle in the Friends of Abandoned Cemeteries records, and all it said was C.W. Nurse. Lynn posted inquiries on the internet and Civil War websites. Never heard a word about Emmeline. But Lynn went on and did her own research, and she found out that Emmeline was born August 13th, 1835, somewhere in New York State. We're not even sure where. She married Amaziah Earle. They had a son who was born in 1861. During the war, we found out that Emmeline was wounded, and she was taken to Kings Point Hospital in Long Island. She died. She did live a good long life. She lived to be 91 years old. She passed on August 1st, 1926. Owing to her Civil War service, she was given full military honors that included a firing squad, full colors, and a bugler. They were all on hand from Richmond County Post number 248 of the Veterans of Foreign War. But guess what? She's buried at Lake Cemetery, a reclaimed abandoned cemetery, and I was told today by Lynn that she lies in an unmarked grave at that site. Another great woman who was on Staten Island, many of you are familiar with her, Alice Austin, born March 17, 1866. She taught herself how to operate a camera. This was a very complex item back in the 1800s. It was in the 1870s. One of her relatives gave her a camera. She learned about exposure, how to develop the heavy glass plates that they had to make in those, how to make prints. She was not only technically skilled, she became artistically accomplished. Now, Alice was socially active, very well traveled, and everywhere she went, she took her camera with her, even though it weighed 50 pounds. Women in the late 1800s didn't drag around 50 pounds of anything, and especially if they were upper class. Somebody usually carried it for them. She carried it herself in a steamer trunk. She created approximately 8,000 glass plates. About 3,000 survive to this day. And she took pictures for the love of it. She had a straightforward style that anticipated what would become documentary photography and photojournalism. She was so far ahead of her time. She took high-quality images that give us now a visual window into the 19th century of the United States. Alice's athletic stamina, as much as her artistic sense, made her an extraordinary photographer. She even climbed fence posts, not caring if she exposed her ankles, in pursuit of the picture she wanted of a local auto race that she was attending. Ladies did not climb fences and expose their ankles for the public to see, but she didn't care. She needed to take a good picture. Elizabeth Gertrude Knight Britton, July 1890. The Natural Science Association, the forerunner of the Staten Island Museum, publishes a preliminary list of the mosses of Staten Island. Not only was it the first list of local mosses, this is important. I see some smiles back there. No. It was very important. It was not only the first list of mosses, it was also the first article published by a woman in Proceedings, the scholarly journal of the Natural Science Association. Very uncommon in the late 1800s for an article to be printed by a woman. She had gone all over Staten Island in the 1880s to study mosses, and she made a complete guide of mosses. She was a graduate of Hunter College, then called the Normal School. She even taught at this institution from 1875 to 1885. She married Nathaniel Lord Britton. Their parallel botanical careers lasted until their deaths, which was only a few months apart in 1934. She was the person who came up with the idea of establishing the New York Botanical Gardens. Who's been to the New York Botanical Gardens? One of the most spectacular botanical gardens in the world, right? She came up with the idea after visiting Kew Botanic Garden in England. The Black Angels, from 1913 to 1960, and after that, Seaview Hospital was a treatment center for tuberculosis patients. Provided a rare opportunity for African American nurses during a time of racial segregation. They were recruited from all over the United States, and many left safer nursing positions from around the country to go to work at Seaview. They also assisted researchers who were working on getting a successful treatment for tuberculosis. So without them, the cure would have been long delayed and many more individuals would have lost their lives. They worked in an environment where exposure to the deadly airborne TB bacteria was a daily risk, and they provided desperately needed care. And I know this for a fact. My father was up at Seaview Hospital and was tended to. The Black Angels and their families became active members of the NAACP, neighborhood churches, community groups. They were founding members of the Lincoln Hospital Alumni Association, the Urban League Guild, and the Women's Civic and Political Union. The first healthcare museum in New York State was established at Seaview Hospital, and it was named for the Black Angel Staversa A. Bethel. Dr. Patricia O'Connor Halloran was a native of Buffalo. She graduated from Cornell University. She was one of three women in a class of 60 to graduate with a degree in veterinary science. She ended up moving to Staten Island. During World War II, the zoo, the Staten Island Zoo's vet, was called into service. And he had to go, as did many of the veterinarians in the United States. So she was asked to come in and volunteer to take his place. And she did. And she stayed for 28 years. She published in 1955 a 465-page reference book, a bibliography of references to diseases of wild mammals and birds. You're going to be tested here, so remember this. It took her 10 years to write it. Do you know that it's still an important textbook that's used in veterinary medicine? Audre Lorde lived from 1934 to 1992. Most people don't know it. She lived on Staten Island from 1972 to 1987. She lived in the historic community of Stapleton. And she fought. She fought about the pollution that was coming over from New Jersey. She fought against local racism. And she fought for civil rights. She was a prolific writer. She confronted racism, sexism, and homophobia. In 1975, Lorde was named Woman of the Year by Staten Island Community College, where LGBT and other civic-minded academics thrived. In 1979, she gave the keynote address before 75,000 people at the first National March for Gay and Lesbian Liberation in Washington, D.C. Elizabeth Connolly, first woman elected to public office on Staten Island. She was elected to the New York State Legislature in 1973. The first woman to head a standing assembly committee when she chaired the Committee on Mental Health, Mental Retardation, Developmental Disabilities, and Alcoholism and Substance Abuse. She had to remember that whole title for that committee. 1970, yeah, it was. She became the Speaker pro tempore in 1995, the highest leadership post ever held by a woman in the Assembly. Elizabeth worked to help close the Fresh Kills landfill. She helped to preserve the Greenbelt, and she worked tirelessly in the defense of the developmentally disabled. Evelyn Morris King, who is now 95 years old. Her 90th birthday was celebrated with a proclamation presented by then Councilman McMahon. At that time, a mural was created by Dreyfus IS 49 students, and they dedicated the library at the school to her. She is a community activist, a Staten Island Advanced Woman of Achievement, an African-American historian, author, teacher, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. She serves as the church historian, as the oldest living member of the Shiloh AME Zion Church. 1971, she wrote The Black Man on Staten Island, an essay that focused on slavery, slave life, emancipation, the Civil War, Sandy Ground, World War II, all of this in relation to Staten Island. Marjorie Decker Johnson, treasurer for the Friends of Abandoned Cemeteries on Staten Island, was a board member of the Friends of Abandoned Cemeteries, also on the board of the Preservation League, the Alice Austin House, wrote numerous articles about history on Staten Island. She contributed 23 articles to the massive, and I mean massive, Encyclopedia of New York City. She was a professional chemist, and she went into business in the work world at a time when women did not work as chemists. She was involved with the Staten Island Geological Society. She's done exhibitions for the Staten Island Museum. Her walking tours were memorable. At Staten Island Advanced Woman of Achievement. She received also the Loring McMillan Award. The list goes on and on. Irma Borges Geisler, I see her in the audience. Born in Mexico City, Irma received a Bachelor of Science degree in biology from the Autonomous University of Mexico City and a PhD. I love when women have PhD. That's so great. From the University of Oxford. Came to New York City in 1991, has been a resident of Staten Island since 1992. Has exhibited at the Austin House, the Staten Island Museum, the Snug Harbor Cultural Center. Awarded multiple grants from the Council on the Arts and Humanities of Staten Island. She has a current project, a long-term photo essay project on the Mexican immigrant community in New York. This is just a very, very small sampling of the people who have impacted Staten Island, the women who have made a difference. I would have also liked to have spoken of Margaret Robinson, the Reverend Hattie Smith Davis, Jane Morgan Lyons, my friend Virginia Allen, Terry Russo, Ellen Pratt, Elizabeth Metters, Beth Gorey, and of course Debi Rose.